All right, I'm here today with Dr. Phil Manfield, and it's an honor to have you with me here today. So thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Um, so Dr. Manfield is a long time therapist. Started in the therapy world as a licensed marriage and family therapist in 1975. Is that correct?
True.
And then began EMDR, working with EMDR therapy in 1991, which is early adopter for EMDR. I believe EMDR came around about 1987, 88, somewhere in there.
No, 91 was when she started training people.
Oh, okay, wow. So
Her papers were published in 89.
Gotcha. Okay, wow. So you're in the very beginning, a pioneer.
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, and then the reason we're here today, the conversation that I'm excited to have is Dr. Manfield is the developer of the Flash technique, which is a EMDR based, I guess you could say,
It's an offshoot.
offshoot, yeah, uh, type of therapy, which I have utilized a lot since, you know, we were chatting a little bit before, and just saying that I was initially introduced to the Flash technique in 2018 at a conference in DC, and no, in Atlanta, and then got trained in 2020, and have been using it ever since, and it's been an amazing addition to the work that I do here with EMDR therapy with my clients. So very grateful for that, and can't wait just to get into just a conversation with you about that. So, just out of curiosity, how all the way back to 91, how did you get into EMDR? How did you begin with that?
Well, my brother's a psychologist in Portland, Oregon, and he was down in the Bay Area visiting me, and the two of us were sitting in one of my favorite spots, which is a hillside that overlooks the ocean, Stinson Beach, and it's just a gorgeous setting. And I have my favorite spots on this hillside. So we were sitting there, and we had a bottle of wine and cheese and some snacks, and we were just shooting the breeze. And he said, I got an email from someone who just swore by this new thing called the EMDR, and he had, and I didn't even know who it was who sent me this email, but he included a couple of Francine Shapiro's papers, and I read the papers, and I thought it was very interesting. And I think my brother and I are both iconoclasts to some degree. And he said, I read the papers, and they gave a rough description of how to do EMDR. So I tried it. And he said, and I've been doing it, and I've been getting good results.
Oh.
So here was, he hadn't even been trained really. It just took the information from the papers, and he said there's something to it. So that week, I read in a local paper that Shapiro was doing a training in Berkeley, and it was the first training she had done in Berkeley. It turned out to be the only one she ever did in Berkeley.
Oh, wow.
But I said, well, what the heck? I signed up. I mean, I signed up the day before the training, and I was very skeptical.
Yeah.
But what really convinced me was that I'd had a car accident a year and a half before, in which I was sitting at a traffic light, and I saw this car coming from at least a quarter mile away, and I was watching her in the rearview mirror, and I was saying to myself, I don't think she's slowing down. And I watched her the whole way. I watched her come up and plow into my car.
Oh my gosh.
And so that was part of the trauma, was actually seeing her do it.
Right.
And after that, I was just, I couldn't sit still at a traffic light if there was a car coming up behind me, even very slow. Same thing with stop signs. And I went into Jungian analysis to try to address the problem, because I couldn't keep my foot on the brake. And so a year and a half of Jungian analysis did zilch, nothing for my my symptom. And here I took the EMDR training, and it includes practicums where you practice being the client for one of your classmates, and then you practice being the therapist for one of your classmates. And so I chose as my my issue this accident I'd had, and here was someone who had never done EMDR, was had 1 day, half a day of training, and in 35 minutes my memory was resolved.
Wow.
And I said to myself, there's something good here.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Something's working.
Yeah. That's it's amazing. People, I've been using EMDR regularly since I was trained in 2015. And I have conversations about it a lot. And, people are like, oh, no, like you can't resolve something in a session or two. And it's like you said, you went in skeptical, and of course you're skeptical. I mean,
I stayed skeptical until that practicum.
Right.
I still was skeptical.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. You think about someone waving their hand in front of your face, and like that's going to resolve something.
Yeah. But I was also, it was one of the first trainings that Shapiro had done, and she had a bunch of facilitators, and she seemed like a Werner Erhard lookalike. She had a lot of the affectation of Erhard, and the facilitators were like, there was a robot-like quality to them. And so I was still skeptical. I mean, I thought there's something to EMDR, but a lot of these aspects of the protocol weren't necessary. That was my attitude. And so and she invited me to be a facilitator, Shapiro did, because I had just published a book on analysis. At that point, I was an analyst. And so she was looking for ways to legitimize EMDR. So she invited me to be a facilitator and be on the staff. And I didn't think I did it very well, which I didn't, but I accepted the invitation. And it was very fortunate that she invited me, because the one thing I got to find out was, the facilitators only worked in the afternoon on Saturday and Sunday in the trainings, and in the mornings we were supposed to be there anyway, and we would sit around and shoot the breeze and tell war stories, basically. I had this client and they had this problem, and I heard all these stories, and even though I knew people were bragging and they embellished, it was still clear to me that people were getting better results than I was. And I was doing kind of my own version of EMDR, and so it's kind of it really sort of put me in my place to see that other people were getting better results than I was. I mean, I was still getting good results, but other people were getting better results. And at one point, after facilitating at 4 or 5 trainings, I said to myself, it's clear that other people are getting better results. I want to get better results. I wonder what I can do. And then I had this epiphany, and I said to myself, I know, I'll try doing the protocol. And so that's what I did. I not only started doing the protocol just the way they were teaching it, but there were lots of little videos of Shapiro doing EMDR that you would see in the training. And I got to see those videos over and over and over again. And I started imitating Shapiro. I started doing everything that she did, including things she didn't know she was doing. And it clearly improved my results quite a bit. And so that's really how I got going with EMDR.
Wow. That's a great story. So this is just totally curiosity. That first training that you went to, the first training in Berkeley, how many people were in that training? Like how well known was EMDR at that point?
It wasn't that well known. I'd say there were 50 people in the training.
Okay.
And once I started facilitating, it seemed like overnight there were 300 people in the trainings.
Yeah. Wow. So you went from that, learning it, practicing it, then becoming a trainer yourself. You've trained kind of all over the world, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I was a facilitator for 8 years, 9 years. And I think it was in 99 that I had facilitated at enough trainings that I knew what the presentation was clearly by heart, what they did. And there were a few things that I thought could be improved. Naturally, that's my nature. But I thought I'd give it a try. And so EMDRIA was just starting to approve independent trainings. EMDRIA is the EMDR International Association. They set the standards for EMDR trainings. And so I applied and was approved as a trainer. And I gave maybe 2 or 3 trainings towards the end of the 1990s. And I gave great trainings. Part of it was that I wasn't allowed to use any of the videos that Shapiro used in the Institute trainings. And so I ended up doing live demonstrations. I did one every day. And that was a scary thing to do at first, but after a while, these demonstrations always worked. And it was a great way. I would show videos of EMDR being done, and that's a good thing for people to see. Here's a session, great result. But it was really clear that when these people in the training saw one of their own get up and sit down in front of the group and say, here's my problem, And then I would do the session with them, and they would get resolved in 45 minutes, half an hour. You could feel the change in the room.
Sure.
People just said, wow. Because, you see a video, you figure, oh, he's got 100 videos and 2 of them were successes, and that's
Right.
what he's showing us.
Right. Yeah.
But
When you
it's
see it
really,
live.
yeah, it's really different when they see someone, they got a problem. There's no preparation for this. We just do it and we get the result.
Right.
And that's good argument for EMDR.
Yeah, for sure. And I tell people all the time, just like one of the things I love about EMDR is just the efficiency of it. Really, it's because your brain's doing the work and your brain knows exactly where it needs to go to heal. And so it's just such an efficient process that when facilitated properly, it's effective all the time. Yeah, that's awesome. So, you talked about making some things better in the training. And so obviously that's your kind of how you operate. You see things that can be changed and improved upon and whatever, which I'm guessing is how what led you to discovering and developing the flash technique. So how did that happen?
Well, the problem with EMDR was that you had to ask the client to focus on the trauma and focus on the worst part. And that was fine 80, 90% of the time. But there was always those times when the client either said, no way I'm going to focus on that,
Right.
or the client tried and then they flooded or they dissociated, and it just didn't work. And so what happened in the evolution of EMDR is that therapists learned to pick a target that was an offshoot of the original target, less disturbing, but related, and process that with the client. And then they might be ready to focus on this terrible target that they started with.
Right.
And that was referred to as titrating. It's a term from chemistry where people water down the target, essentially, and then go back to the original one. And so people had various ways of watering down targets, and I really liked one that was developed by Christina Kanowski, a psychologist in Victoria, Canada, and she did this thing she called paired titration, where she had the client focus on something positive, a photo that they had in their mind, and then think of the disturbing target memory for just a moment, and then go back to the positive image. And you could narrow down the amount of time. I used to tell people, you're going to think of just the periphery of the disturbing memory, and then before you can even think about it in any depth, you're going to come right back to the positive image. And I was experimenting with just narrowing the client's exposure to the target as much as possible. And I was going to do a presentation in EMDR about it. And I thought, I wonder what would happen if I have the client have their exposure be so minimal that they don't even feel any disturbance. So that's what I did. I started experimenting with that. And I started getting these huge processing effects that I'd never seen before. And that was the original flash technique.
So how many sort of experimental sessions like that did you do before you realized you were really onto something big with the flash technique?
Well, I realized it was big almost right away because the difference in the processing effect was enormous. And then I told my brother, and I told a behavioral psychiatrist, behavioral pediatrician in Berkeley, Joan Lovett, and I told Louis Engel, friend and colleague, about it. And just with each of them, a day or two later, I got a phone call. Boy, I did it. I got this. It was incredible. I had this incredible session. And I had dinner with Joan, and she said to me, you got to write this up and publish it, because if you don't, somebody else will. And so I had my brother and Louis and Joan tell me about incredible sessions. I said, look, write up your session. And I wrote up the session, and then we published the first paper, which was basically 4 case reports about these incredible sessions. And in a way, they were incredible treatments, because each one was a complete treatment in a session. And so that was that's when I knew it really was something. And I remember I wrote to Ricky Greenwald about it, and he wrote back within an hour or two. He's a very religious guy, but he used an expletive that was sacrilegious. He said, "This is amazing."
So yeah, you said it was like a treatment in one session, and that brings me to a question I was going to ask. Is when I was first introduced to Flash by you and Dr. Engel in 2018 in Atlanta, I feel like, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like y'all are at that point talking about this is a great method for desensitizing disturbance around something. And then last year in DC at the EMDR conference, it seems like you were talking about it more in terms of like, this is actually a processing therapy. Is that
well, the politics of the psychotherapy world is pretty bizarre. I mean, EMDR Francine went through hell introducing EMDR. The people called her a snake oil salesman, and I remember one academician said the only thing new about EMDR is not good, and the only thing good is not new. And I mean, they just really, really put her through the meat grinder, and that she just and it really hurt EMDR. It took EMDR. Well, it took 10 years to get reasonable acceptance, and another 10 years, and there's still debate about EMDR. And so when we started teaching EMDR, Flash, you couldn't teach Flash and encourage people to do it without other people saying that's unprofessional because it's not evidence-based. You can't encourage people to do something that's not evidence-based. Yeah. So we encourage people to do it within the context of EMDR, which was evidence-based, and within the context of EMDR, it could be used. But initially our paper was the only paper. Now there are 23 papers published about flash technique, and lots of incredible research, and randomized controlled trials, which is the gold standard. So flash is evidence-based, and so we couldn't encourage people to just treat clients with flash before it was evidence-based, but now it's pretty solidly evidence-based, and the fact is it's faster than anything I know, and as we do it, we learn more. I mean, I use a lot of the techniques from EMDR when I'm doing flash. I always have the option, if something's not working with flash, I can switch and use EMDR if I like. But when I use some of these techniques that I've borrowed from EMDR, flash usually takes a disturbing memory and reduces it to not disturbing at all.
Yeah, which brings me, so gosh, I've got so many questions. And at some point, I'd love to get like a 90-second, like, kind of elevator speech on pitch on what flash is, because we're talking about flash, and or maybe people who are watching this, I imagine so, and I hope so they can learn about it, but they don't know what flash is or what we're even talking about. So I'd love to hear that.
Why don't we do? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah. So that, one thing I'd love to hear, just kind of the summary of like what it is, and also like you're talking about how you can kind of use flash technique and then go back to some EMDR techniques, wherever. And so, in that, like, do you recommend that only EMDR therapists use this, or is this safe and effective therapy for anyone? And like, just
no. I mean, I'm an EMDR therapist, and so when I started doing flash, EMDR is my background, and so if I want to go to a backup, I'll go to EMDR, and but we really encourage other types of therapists, CPT therapists, CBT therapists, internal family systems therapists, prolonged exposure. EMDR can help with all those flash can help with all those therapies, because you can have a 10-minute flash session with a client who is highly traumatized, and by the end of that 10 minutes, it hasn't reduced to a zero in disturbance, but it's reduced substantially, and it makes the treatment, whatever treatment a therapist is using, it makes it much easier and more rapid. And flash can still be used as a way to completely process trauma. And so therapists who do other kinds of trauma treatments can certainly do flash.
Yeah. So tell us, like, just the
elevator speech.
Yeah, the elevator speech.
I hesitate to do it because I will, but I'm just afraid people will hear it and they'll just turn off their computer, because like this can't possibly work. And I even say that to myself sometimes. But
kind of like EMDR, I think for all of us who have used it, before I used it, I thought, can this actually work? And then now, after years of using it, I'm like, it works all the time. It's amazing.
Yeah. But let me just start with some very established research done by a fellow named Paul Siegel. He's in upstate New York, and he did a study where he took two groups of arachnophobics, yes, and people who are terrified of spiders, and one group, he flashed a picture of some spiders on the screen, and that was enough to really get these people activated. So the effect of doing it over, I don't know how many minutes, maybe 15 minutes, was that there was an exposure effect. And so they became less afraid of spiders as a result of this exposure. The other group, he did the same thing. He flashed the spiders on the screen, but he did it so rapidly that they didn't know they'd seen a spider. But the brain registered. It didn't register consciously that they'd seen a spider, but it registered unconsciously, and so they also had an exposure effect, and their arachnophobia reduced. But the incredible thing is that the ones who didn't know they saw a spider had a significantly greater reduction in their um, uh, arachnophobia than the ones who knew they had seen a spider.
Yeah, yeah, wow.
And that was and he's done 13 studies at this point that have been published, and at least one was published in Lancet, which is like the Journal of American Medical Association, but in England, it's the highest. And so he's very well respected, and his work is very well respected. But to me, it really it says a lot about what we're doing with flash technique, and that is we tell people, okay, now I hear what the trauma is that you want to resolve, and now I want you to stop thinking about it. I want you to stop talking about it, and then we work out a distraction, something that they can focus on so they don't think about their disturbing memory. And so we call that the positive engaging focus, although it doesn't have to be positive. There are definitely PEFs that work that are not positive. But we have the client think of their alternative, their engaging focus, and then periodically we say the word flash, and what they're supposed to do is blink rapidly 3, 4, 5 times each time we say the word flash. And after we've done that about 5, 6 times, we ask them to take a break. And how are we doing on time, by the way? Good. Take a break, and without thinking about any of the details of the disturbing memory, just see if you notice a change. And
now there's a bilateral component too, right? Is there tapping?
Yeah, thank you. So while they're, and I don't know if that bilateral component is a necessary component, but it is a part of what we do. We have them tap on their thighs while they're thinking of their PEF. And usually when we're doing one-to-one, I have the client tell me about their positive focus, because it intensifies it. When they talk about it, I ask questions, they answer, we laugh. So we check in, any change. And the second time we check in, there's usually been a lot of change. Sometimes after the first time we check in.
Yeah.
But I think of it as very similar to Siegel's work in that Siegel's work, that he did some fMRI, and it verified that the amygdala, which is a part of the brain that gets you into fight or flight, it doesn't get activated during this subliminal exposure to the spiders. And if it doesn't get activated, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that processes phobia, it becomes more active. And so you get more of a processing effect if you don't let the person get activated, get upset. And we do the same thing. We don't let the client get upset. We don't let them go into the details when they first tell us about the trauma, as long as we can see that they're thinking of it.
Right.
And we just start distracting them, and we check in. And even during the check-in, we tell them not to give us any details, not to think of any details.
Yeah.
And this seems to produce an accelerated processing effect, just like with Siegel's research.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And the way I describe it, and tell me if this is wrong, because I don't want to say things wrong to my clients, but the way I describe it to people is like on your computer, sometimes you can open up, say like my antivirus is running in the background, and while I'm, whatever, watching Netflix or having a conversation with you or something. And so what's in front of me is this conversation. What's going on in the background is this antivirus software or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like doing the processing in the background without even my awareness while
That's
I'm
right.
connected to something else. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's become a huge part of software, really, that there's all these resonant programs that are going on in the background, and people have resonant programs going on. I mean,
That's right.
I'm at an age when I've done it a couple of times in talking to you, I've had trouble finding a word. Arachnophobia was an example. And it's a word I know really well, but I was having trouble finding it. And what I've learned is that if I just give up on it and go on with use a workaround, another word, and then 5 minutes later, all of a sudden that word will come popping into my head,
Right.
even though I didn't think I was still trying to find it. But
Right.
obviously my brain is still trying to find it.
It's still scanning.
It's still scanning.
Yeah.
And then, it'll come to my mind and I'll blurt it out. So, the brain research has just verified that the part of the brain that does all the work, working memory, has lots and lots and lots of things going on outside of conscious awareness. So people are often dumbfounded after we do this work with them, and they say, "What happened? It's not upsetting anymore. What did you do to me?"
Yeah.
Because they weren't aware that they were working on the problem.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, so cool. So I guess we want to wrap up here pretty quickly, but I want to just in closing with the flash technique. So once a client has been introduced to it and they're able to use this to desensitize and even process a traumatic memory within a therapeutic setting in an office, is it something that you recommend, or is it okay for a person who understands that to say you go home and you have an argument with your spouse and you're disturbed, or whatever, is it okay to then practice flash technique by yourself, not in processing a traumatic event, but just in sort of desensitizing disturbance or regulating yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do it on myself sometimes. I process disturbing events. I mean, you have to know yourself. You have to know whether you're stable enough to do that. But absolutely. And we have a computer program that's online that people run. It's had over 10,000 trials now, and the results get collected, so I can do analysis of the results, and people get over 50% reduction in disturbance in 8 minutes. So it's pretty amazing.
And is that something that we can share with people who see that program, or is that?
Well, I share it with therapists because I just don't want to get sued. Somebody is thinking about committing suicide and they run the program and it doesn't help and they commit suicide, and then their family says, they ran the program, that's the reason. So, I don't charge anything for it. It's free, but mostly I tell therapists about it, and they can tell their clients about it. But I just want for people to run the program, I want them to have some kind of relationship with the therapist, so that if something goes wrong, they can talk to the therapist. But we actually monitor the results, and nothing has ever gone wrong. I mean, that we know of. We've identified, I think, out of 10,000, we've identified something like 20 people who've had their disturbance go up and then haven't had a subsequent session where the disturbance went down. So that's about 20 people, and that's over about a 5-6 year period. And then we write to those people and say, are you okay? And we haven't had anyone report that the program's had a negative effect on them. But the other thing, by the way, is we just started a YouTube channel for Flash Technique. And so people who want to know what it is can go to this channel and see about, I think at this point, there's 13 or 14 sessions that are online. And plus, they can see, we're putting EMDR sessions online that they can see and see how EMDR works.
I'll link to those things here on this video so people can follow that and go through.
Great.
Well, thank you so much. I know I need to let you go, but I really very, very grateful for your time and just your willingness to share this with us. You know, like I was saying earlier, the message that we want people to hear is that there's hope for healing, and with a technique like the Flash technique, you know, something that I've used a lot, and I know a lot of therapists who have. You know, this is a part of that healing process. So I'm really grateful for the work that you've done and for your time here today. So
yeah, absolutely. It can do so much good. I was just having lunch the other day with a woman who's teaching Ethiopian therapists to do it. And, you know, there's been a civil war there. People are devastated. I won't even talk about what's gone on there because it'll traumatize the people watching this. But now they've got therapists that are going out to these towns where they've had devastating things happen as a result of the Civil War. And they're doing it in groups with these people, and they're getting these incredible healings. It's just, there's so much potential.
Yeah, there is. I'm very excited about it. I tell people about it all the time. I'm a EMDR consultant, and I tell people I'm consulting with about it. And obviously I use it with clients all the time. So I'm very excited about it. So it really was an honor to be able to have this conversation with you today.
My pleasure. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.